Hello, Generals. We are back with Ultimate General Civil War, playing the Union Major General campaign. And this is the army that we're going to be taking into the next battle, whose name I continue to forget. So I'll just wait until I see it on the screen here. Taking a look at the way the Confederate Army has bounced back after Gettysburg. Their average strength is up to or down to 50,000, which is a huge hit from where they were going into Chancellorsville. That's great. Training and armory both hovering in the mid 50s. I've got plenty of cash. I've got plenty of dudes. Let's take a look at what's coming up for Chickamauga. This is a battle that I have not played in ages, so I can't speak intelligently about how it's going to go. But this is Bayou Fourche, and this is like sort of the follow-up from the Vicksburg siege, which is a shame that we don't get to play, although I get why, in that the historical battle was, kind of just an urban fight, and it wouldn't really work for this game. If I recall correctly, it's kind of house to house. So Bayou Fourche tasks the player with attacking a really great Confederate defensive position, except that it's kind of hard for them to man all the possible river crossings. And it's one of those battles that kind of gives you instructions that would lead you to essentially suicide, basically. So it's telling us now that we have these crossings into the woods, directly across, and then further up north. And what it very nicely does, or what I think is good, that it says here, it'll say something along the lines of caution rather than bravado will win the day. And this is one of those battles where that is absolutely the case. Caution rather than bold. If you go charging in there, and I've done this, even on Brigadier General, the medium difficulty. But yeah, I think I did it on Brigadier. At that point in time, the Confederate Army is basically destroyed, and I still just march my men into a slaughter, walking up that hill. So essentially, the Confederate defensive position is heavily wooded, over on the other end of a river, uphill. It's disastrous. We've been manning defensive terrain like that pretty much the entire campaign to good effect, and so now the AI gets to, we get to put the shoe on the other foot. You get 15 units here. The way that I've structured my army is probably a mistake, but I've got all my artillery in 3rd Division, and then all the infantry in 1st and 2nd Division. So what I do is I get kind of this mixed ad hoc force that I stick a couple of infantry units in that little island force as kind of a blocking unit, and then 2 20-pound Parrott units in the island force. And then in this main body, I bring units or guns that I feel are more mobile or more useful for medium and infantry support work, which is it's a unit of Wyards, it's a unit of James's, and it's a unit of 24-pound howitzers. That's essentially, it's just kind of a catch-all infantry support artillery package, with the Wyards intended to be kind of a lighter equivalent to support the 2 Parrott batteries that are going to be working on de-gunning the Confederate position. Now they've got, I want to say, 100 cannon to my 66, which is, pretty good. And then on an infantry standpoint, I do believe that they outnumber me. However, about 1,500-ish is in cavalry, and then like another 1,000 is skirmishers. So, all right. So, battle prep having been completed, we're now moving into the advanced stage. I've got this portion of the video accelerated really quickly to, I think, 350%. And that's just because this portion of the video, there's not really anything terribly exciting that happens. We get our troops into position. We advance along the far left, out of line of effect of their cannons, and then continue to advance in the woods with skirmishers to make sure that I don't get caught unawares. But then we advance our artillery into a position where between the 20-pound Parrotts to the far south and the Wyard and James batteries to the west of the Confederate position, we can get kind of I don't want to say crossfire, but an angle of fire on those two large batteries, and we focus on knocking out one before we put fire on the other. I detach a unit of skirmishers to stand on that recon point and make sure that we have line of sight to Confederate artillery, and then we can just kind of deal with them from afar. It's evident from the lack of counter battery fire on their end that we outrange them, which, I mean, just gives me plenty of impetus to just kind of wait, to just kind of take it slow. So that's exactly what I do, and that's why this portion of the video is accelerated so strongly, is there's a lot of just sitting there and doing counter gun work. So it's not very exciting video, but I want every second of actual gameplay to be on the screen so that if you want to watch this and, make sure, then you can do that. Very briefly, just there a second ago, I was checking the lines of movement to see if I can get my supply cart over to the 20-pound Parrots. It's a mistake of alignment that I can't. And I'm thinking that if I was to do this again, I'd bring 2 units of Wireds down on that island force, because the Wireds are relatively cheap to keep shooting, whereas the Parrots, I think, run through their ammunition fairly quickly. Otherwise, though, the infantry just kind of advance with an eye towards crossing on that northern crossing, and then we're going to go ahead and cannonade Mouser? Monroe? Whatever. That unit of infantry plus the battery. We're going to go ahead and cannonade them off that position before trying to cross. Crossing the river is quite dangerous. And, I mean, as we've seen basically the entire campaign, a contested crossing can be a real death trap to troops. So it's not very exciting to watch, but I spend a significant portion of the game time on the map just blasting these guys off of their defenses and then trying to cross as close to unopposed as possible. So instead of kind of the dashing, aggressive movements that I've been doing most of the campaign, especially in this particular map, instead what you see is very short, sharp movements. So there's one battery gone. When I do move aggressively, or when I do move, I move aggressively. But until I do, my men are rested, my men wait, all that kind of stuff. And when the time comes for action, then I commit heavily. And that's coming up fairly soon here. Is I blast the battery away, I steal the supply wagon, blast the battery off the river crossing, and then when Monroe, I'm still not sure I'm reading that right. Sorry. When the Confederate unit opposing my crossing, whomever he may be, Mueller perhaps, he'll break at some point from the artillery fire. Here I attempt a crossing with skirmishers to see if it's possible, and I almost immediately see that the crossing is, so I catch fire from somebody in the woods that I can't even see, and so I just decide, okay, everything to the south isn't going to try and cross the woods, or isn't going to try and cross the river. It's just not happening. And get those guys out of there and then fold them back in with their parent unit. And so it's unfortunate that the 2 Parrot units to the south that are my strongest counter battery are out of ammunition fairly quickly, and I don't really have any means to resupply them, which is frustrating because I've got too much supply on one side of the river and not enough on the other. Is what it is, nothing I can do about it right now. So you can see now kind of why I've accelerated this so quickly, and even in the game I'm at double time because I'm using 24-pound howitzers for solid shot work, which is where they're not at their best. I want to get them, and I keep on trying to inch them forward. I want to get them to the point where they're shelling something at least, because I know canister is inviting counterfire, which obviously I don't want. But shelling would be good. So you'll see me kind of continue to inch that battery forward and now they're offering us the ability to finish the mission. I don't know how it's possible to finish this mission without taking insane casualties in the time initially allotted, and I think we end up having a little more time. Theoretically, if I hadn't tripped the flag, I probably would have had more time than I end up getting, but it is what it is. So now I brought the Wyards up and the Jameses to fire off that one battery. So now I could try and cross, and I don't. I wait to get the opportunity, but now I could try and cross, and it would be much less disastrous than if I were to do so with counter battery fire, with canister and or shell fire. But what I'm doing now is I'm continuing to put as close a range of artillery as I feel comfortable onto the infantry unit here, and then I'm staging my infantry to get to the point where when the time comes, we can push across. Okay, Mauser, that's what he's got it. That's why I couldn't read it. So yeah, keep inching forward, and that I feel like that's the sweet spot because I feel like I just got into not canister, but shrapnel, whatever the middle range is called. Because the 24-pounders, I inch them forward, and there's a noticeable improvement in the efficacy of the shot work. So, yeah, rough day to be these guys, obviously. And right about, you'll notice the video slowed down. Right about now, they're about to decide enough's enough. And, yeah, so here's the time. So what we do is when I try and cross, the objective is to establish a foothold blocking force as quickly as possible that can ensure the safe crossing for everybody else. So 24th, 5th, and 31st Infantry stream across the river, and I've got them running. All this stuff. I've got them going as fast as possible. And then behind them, I have the remainder of my infantry force, McClellan himself, the supply wagons, and the artillery. But those 3 brigades of infantry are forming the safe wall with which I can cross. And so now we see some of the things supporting Mauser, he's down to half strength at this point. He tries to retake his entrenchments, which makes sense. I can see why he'd want to. There's 1,500 some odd cavalry on this side of the river, and I think there's a 3rd unit that I can't see right now. So this is where it gets kind of dangerous because this crossing is right now being contested again. But fortunately, I've got 33rd in position to basically immediately engage in melee, and then 24th and 5th provide supporting fire, and that's just too much for the morale engine of this particular game. And then Mauser takes some pretty horrendous musketry casualties as well as close-range artillery. And at that point in time, the bridgehead has been secured, or the foothold's been secured. At this point in time, their local forces probably don't have the positioning strength, numbers, offensive firepower, etc., to reverse the crossing. And so I commit. All of my infantry comes across, the artillery, the supply wagons, McClellan, etc. I'm feeling confident now in the crossing, and so we begin to expand, try and make sure that we have better positioning, because right now I'm marching uphill, I'm shooting uphill, I'm still in a position where if they get on that ridgeline and shoot down at me or something, none of those are good. But again, we're feeling more and more secure. I keep the artillery pretty mobile in this particular part. These are all, I would say, with the exception of the 24-pound howitzers, medium weight guns. So I don't think that this game models the speed in terms of weight of artillery, although I do know that Panda Kraut's rebalance mod does take that into account. And it's why I hope I'm going to be utilizing 3-inch artillery and Napoleons a lot more often, because they're going to be good flying batteries, essentially, infantry support. And then I'll also have different kinds of heavier batteries relegated to where I would imagine kind of the traditional divisional artillery kind of thing, where there's infantry support and then there's more long-range kind of counter battery bombardment type stuff. So I've got those skirmishers down there in the bottom. They're still in position because of that recon point, and because, I mean, 400 more skirmishers doesn't make that much of a difference to the power of this offensive. So again, with the breachhead, or with the breach/beachhead, whatever, I'm trying to expand my foothold as much as possible at this point safely. Again, pushing the artillery into a position where they can support, because I know I've scanned the recon bar at some juncture that the Confederates still have something like 40 some odd guns, or no, something have like more like 60. So I know I'm going to have to do some counter battery work, and now I've advanced the infantry to a place where I can see the remainder of Becker's battery, and now I can see 2 new batteries. And so pretty immediately I get my cannons to work removing their guns as much as possible from the equation. I dispatch a skirmisher swarm from the assembled brigades with the idea of either engaging with the cavalry or extending my flank as wide as possible to try and see if I can't loop around in some of this open terrain and get some shots on these cannons, with an idea that even if the skirmishers don't take the guns out, they'll get them to that kind of flashing white morale state where they're not firing with efficiency, and that's good enough for me right now. If I can knock out batteries, great, sweet, happy, love it. Don't really, it's great. I'm all about it. But the number one objective at the moment is to get them to the point where they're not shooting effectively. And at that point in time, I'm happy. I've got a brigade of infantry to the north of the map there trying to scare off the cavalry and make sure they don't get around my rear, which is exactly what cavalry should do. The AI is using them very well on this map. It's just, you know, I think the AI does mostly everything right. I would probably have kept a more dynamic defensive force. You've got 2 brigades of infantry in the back, the top and the right, essentially, of their defensive fortifications that probably could have come out of those trenches and met me at the bridge to make that crossing a little harder. And then these 2 batteries of cannons, the same thing. They could have defended that bridge a little better. And I would have been really, I frankly would have been very hard pressed to cross with that kind of artillery coverage. So the skirmishers continue to aggressively advance and move on the cannons with the eye on, if not killing them, tying them up. I just want them to the point where they don't have a chance to recover their morale more than anything else. And then there's the Arkansas cavalry tussling with the 2 brigades of infantry up north. And then we get into the next kind of wait and see portion of the map or the battle. So their artillery having largely been dealt with to the point of it's still here, but it's not effective, and that's good enough for me. My cannon work now turns to essentially trying to accomplish the same objective that I did with the bridge crossing, is get this unit on the top here, whose name I can't read, I apologize, to route. Or sorry, not route. Route. And then once that opening is created, swarm the breach, and then get oblique fire on the sides of nope, can't read it. Looks like tapas, like the kind of food. That's not right at all. So anyway, these 2 units that are sort of flanking the one up top, left and right of the little bastion that they've got going on here. So yeah, here we have kind of that magic moment. So, Tippin, perhaps, and McBee, and then the guy who just routed is like Reagan or Pagan or Fagan or something like that. Maybe Fagan. Anyway, so Fagan's routing, and then I zoom forward with the infantry to get kind of sideways or oblique fire on Tippin and then McBee. However, this creates an opening where the Texas cavalry feels as if they can charge in. They don't manage it because I have successful infantry fire. This part's a mistake. I send 29th Infantry to occupy those trenches with an eye towards kind of... they're good trenches, and I want that melee defense buff, but it was a mistake. They get shot from enough different directions and the morale just goes to shit. I double down on this with 35th and 5th. And then, so now we zoom in and we attack the uh, the Confederate fire base, the whole objective of this mission, because this fire base of theirs is, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of like the rationale for the mission, is this fire base of theirs is preventing Union gunboats, I think, riverine craft from utilizing this river. I think was the reason that we're trying to kick them out of here, to presumably send supplies and supporting gunboat infantry and whatnot, or gunboat ships or transports down the Mississippi and all of that. We push into the fort, and I probably trigger a timer. Yeah, because I don't remember. There's not a whole lot of time left in the mission, so I probably trigger a timer here that I didn't mean to, because now, like, I don't think the casualties on this map are as high as they could be, because I've spent so much time simply degunning the Confederates. I haven't really killed much. So, on the other hand, my casualties are also quite low. So, it is what it is, I suppose. This part's unfortunate, and I think this part could go better in the future. So they still have a great little bastion or defensive position in this forest to the south of the fort. And in the moment, because I don't want them to take the flag back, I don't know how to dissuade them from using it or take it from them. So I engage in a firefight admittedly with close range artillery. And here I'm taking a look and seeing if I can't find another way to cross that river, and I can't. With my southern force, because I would love to kind of envelop or double envelop their position. I engage in essentially a poor terms firefight where my guys are in the open and they're in the woods, and the only kind of equalizing factor about that is that I have 3 batteries of artillery in close range and they have none, which would probably be the thing that tips this particular firefight in my favor, but it still doesn't feel good, right? Like, it doesn't feel great to be in this firefight. So McRae and the Arkansas Cavalry just get not destroyed, but they get reamed by 12th Infantry. 12th Infantry has a great day, but the 22nd, the 5th, the 33rd, they all kind of have a rough go of it, and I think that I should have committed my flankers earlier, because I've got 24th and I think 16th, or perhaps 36th, on the far right of the screen, Union left, in a position where they could really spoil. I mean, and that's what they're doing. They just don't do it fast enough. They could really spoil this Confederate line that's starting to form up here. And it's a great line. It's a great defensive line. It's 6,000-ish Confederate infantry. They've got Clark streaming down here to try and engage me in the river, and I'm in this moment in time, I'm pretty much panicking. I got to be honest with you. I'm like, oh God, I'm in the river. They're in the woods. They're uphill. Like, it's really bad for me. Fortunately, instead of stopping in the woods and shooting at me, which would probably be the best solution, they commit to this whole, we're going to go fight you in melee thing. And I'm able to get 3 units of infantry, and I believe one of the artillery units reloads in time to contribute, and Clark just has had enough. So fighting me in the waterfront versus shooting at me from the wood line. Thank goodness for the AI sometimes is all I can think about that. But yeah, so this engagement, if it hadn't been ended prematurely by the clock, has the potential to actually be kind of disastrous for this mission. Just because their infantry line is still very much intact. And I'm struggling to cross or hit them from enough sides to do so effectively. I have the high ground, I have the fort, I have the flag, I have the supply, I still outgun everything in terms of artillery. But that forest is probably going to be a bitch, a devil of a time to take. Fortunately, I'm saved by the bell. The mission ends with 1,300 and change before medicine, Union casualties, and I want to say 5,000 ish Confederate. Probably most of them are in the artillery, but I couldn't tell you. We got a whole bunch of promotions, which is fantastic. We get some CS Richmonds, which is cool, I guess. And it looks like they're mostly using 12-pound howitzers, which is surprising considering how many 10-pound Parrots I've been seeing in previous battles. But I would imagine A lot of this comes down to their armory kind of falling off the wayside because I was very effective in inflicting a lot of disastrous casualties at Chancellorsville and Gettysburg, to the point that it's possible the game is mimicking that struggle to re-equip those troops by essentially suggesting that the Confederates are digging into reserves of weapons that would likely have been decommissioned. Now, historically, I think a 12-pound howitzer would have been melted and recast into a different gun rather than stored like a mothball situation. But I mean, whatever. So that's Bayou Fourche. With the exception of the way I stormed the fort, I'm pretty sure that battle went pretty much perfectly. That is a much more methodical and slow methodology for how I would go about that kind of a fight, but that map pretty much demands caution rather than boldness or aggression, which is, I know, kind of my hallmark. So we're going to get ready for Chickamauga here. I can only bring 2 core, so I'll have to make sure that these are my best or stacked core. And without further ado, this is Fiasco. I hope you had a great time. Signing off.